Good morning from Washington, D.C. I'm Paul Kincaid, Director of Congressional Outreach for FMC, the Association of Former Members of Congress. I'd like to welcome all of you to our discussion of the first presidential debate presented by FMC along with our partners, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA. This is an interactive discussion today, so if you have a question at any time, simply click the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, fill out your name and your question, and if we choose you, I'll be calling on you to ask your question over audio only to our panel. Again, anytime during the call, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to ask your question. Unique is a word used frequently. Many times those who do will put other words in front of it, like extremely, very, or sometimes even uniquely. Unique is actually a superlative, though. It means that the thing being discussed is the only one like it. Today, we'll discuss a unique presidential debate held last night at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. To introduce you to our incredibly qualified panel of folks who will discuss it will be the President-elect of FMC, former Congressman L.F. Payne. L.F. represented Virginia's 5th Congressional District as a Democrat from 1988 to 1997. Following his time in Congress, L.F. worked with McGuire Woods and is now a member of the Governing Council of the Miller Center at his alma mater, the University of Virginia. Now, for what we know will be a super unique discussion of last night's debate. Congressman Payne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning and welcome, and thank you all for joining this morning for the first of our presidential election series in partnership with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. And a very special thanks to our very strong supporter, Chairman and President of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, Dr. Sadahiro Okamoto. Thank you, Dr. Okamoto. And it's my pleasure to welcome the communities of both FMC, former members of Congress, and Sasakawa to this very special event. The presidential election series will continue as we near the election, and we're happy to share with you this morning that our next event will be next week on October 8th after the vice presidential debate. And we'll be hosting a panel discussion at 9 a.m. Eastern Time featuring former Congressman Luke Messer of Indiana and former Congressman Vic Fazio of California, with Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of the Hill newspaper, moderating this discussion. So we look forward this morning to a very thoughtful discussion among our panel about last night's unique debate, as Paul has pointed out. And this will be followed up by questions from the audience in the second half of the program. And so to ask your question, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and provide your question, but also your name and your organization as well. I'm very pleased to moderate this panel of such distinguished leaders. Former Senator Tim Hutchinson, Republican of Arkansas, spent 2 decades in public office, including serving in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, where he focused particularly in education and healthcare. And Tim is a very active member of our board at FMC. We have former Senator Tim Wirth, Democrat of Colorado, who also served both in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, focusing on among other things, environmental issues, particularly climate change. He served in the Clinton administration State Department as the first Undersecretary of Global Affairs, and subsequently served as the first president of the United Nations Foundation, and he now serves on that board of directors. And former Congressman Martin Frost, a Democrat of Texas, served for 26 years in the House of Representatives. He represented people of the Dallas and Fort Worth area. He was an active member of the Democratic leadership during those years, where he served as chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. Congressman Frost and former Republican Congressman Tom Davis have co-authored the recent book, The Partisan Divide, Congress in Crisis. Congressman Frost is the past president of the former members of Congress. And I would like to ask each of our panelists then to make some brief introductory remarks, and I'd like Congressman Frost to go first.
Well, thank you, LF. This is an interesting opportunity we have. I'm going to make some general remarks, a little historical perspective, I'm not going to talk initially about individual points made during the debate, though that may come up later. I watched my first presidential debate as a freshman in college in 1960. That was Kennedy-Nixon. And I've watched presidential debates every election in the intervening 60 years. I was very young when I watched the first debate. Let me make a general comment about last night. I thought that President Trump made a very chaotic presentation, and more so than any candidate, Democrat or Republican, that I have seen in any of the presidential debates. I also think that he forfeited some of the goodwill he'd built up in the last month through several things. We had, I thought, a reasonably good response when he was nominated from the Rose Garden at the White House. I thought he had a reasonably good rollout of his Supreme Court nominee. And he hosted a peace ceremony between two Gulf states and Israel. These were all relatively positive things for the president. I think he sacrificed a lot of that goodwill last night. And I would hope that, assuming there are more debates, that the next debates have a strict time limit. And if need be, give the moderator a kill switch so that he can turn off the mic of the person who's not speaking when the other person has 10 minutes or 2 minutes to speak, or whatever period of time. But I look forward to sharing views with my other two former House colleagues, to former senators, very responsible people in their own right. Thank you very much.
Senator Hutchinson? Senator, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Little mic down at the bottom of the screen.
There we go. This one's a little different. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for, I'm so honored to be a part of this. Last night, I thought was, Martin called it chaotic. I think it was a street brawl. It was an alley fight. Trump is a no holds barred, rough and tumble kind of debater. Oftentimes after a presidential debate, it's tempting, and a lot of analysts do this, to technically analyze the debate on substantive points and style points, and then declare who won the debate. Most political analysts thought that 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton won all the debates, hands down. But there was something in Trump's really unorthodox style that struck a chord with a lot of people, of the American people, a lot of voters. Last night, I think both candidates scored points. I thought Trump succeeded in getting under Biden's skin, and Biden's kind of famous temper flash. On COVID-19, the president argued that death rates are down, therapeutics are improved, and a vaccine is just around the corner. He said Biden would shut down the whole economy again, and that we can't afford to do that. That message, I think, will play well in the red states. How it plays in the battleground states and in the suburbs is another question altogether. The president scored points with his tough law and order message. Vice President Biden was pressed to name one national law enforcement group that had endorsed him. And to me, he seemed nonplussed. He certainly seemed stumped. He gave no answer. But rather than declare a victor based on traditional standards, because there was absolutely nothing traditional about the debate last night, I think we have to wait and see if public opinion was moved at all. Thanks, LF.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wirth?
Great. Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be part of this panel with the former members. And Martin and I were together in the House for a long time, so it's good to see you. Thank you, Tim. I had a couple of thematic reactions to the debate. One, what did Trump want to accomplish going into the debate? I think that they were hoping to upend Biden's and make Biden, less, appear to be less capable, that he was too old, that he couldn't handle attack, that I think that was a basic strategy of the Trump people, and I thought Biden, for the most part, handled it just fine. He kept his calm And, you know, that goal for the Trump people was not successful. Second, what did Trump say? But that was good for Biden. What did Trump want to accomplish? It seems to me that he went into the debate behind, and he overall in the election, and he had to do what he could to try to take back some turf. And the turf that he was after has been, I think, the suburban women. And I don't think he was successful in doing that at all last night. That's a voting group that moved from him to some cases undecided, but more at this point, apparently, more into a Biden column. And that was not successful for the president. I think that women, and I certainly know that was in my household, I watched the debate with my granddaughter, with my daughter, with my sister-in-law, and my sister. And all those women were really turned off by the aggression of the president and the fact of his attempt to really bully his way through the debate. So I think that he short-circuited in his own goal, which was to try to get suburban women back. I think that was central to what they tried to do. So I had those two overall reactions, and I'll be very interested in what you guys, Tim and Martin, say further, and then in the questions and comments that come in. Thanks a lot, Alex. Nice to be with you.
Thank you very much, Senator Wirth. And following up on Senator Wirth's point about the debate, as we all know, you know, all of us having served and having been involved in our own debates and debate preparation and helping others do the same, there's always a strategy or a plan as to what you want to accomplish in the debate and the message that you'd like for people to get out of it, and identifying exactly who it is that you're speaking to. And I think senators touched on that, but I'd like for first you, Senator Hutchinson, also to talk just a little bit about what you think maybe the strategy of both Biden and Trump were last night, and to what extent do you think they may have succeeded?
Thanks, LF. I think time will tell how much success there was as the polls, as we see what the polls say. But Biden, I think, as Tim indicated, he wanted to show his ability to stand toe-to-toe with Donald Trump for 90 minutes with no big major gaffes, and to show his mental acuity. And I think on that front, he succeeded. I think President Trump, as usual, played very much to his base. He also, I think, was seeking to show to drive a wedge between the more moderate part of the Democratic Party and the more left progressive part of the Democratic Party. And he did that a number of times in pushing the differences perhaps between his vice presidential running mate and himself on the Green Deal and on the manifesto. And there were a number of issues that he brought that I think he was trying to show that, Biden, you're going to lose your left wing, and to try to drive a wedge there. So those were, I think, some of their goals. And again, Trump is getting widely panned, as we're hearing on this conference today, in the media in general. But he is how the American people respond. I mean, sure, suburban women, I think blue states are by and large, blue, more moderate areas are going to be turned off. But frankly, there was a lot to be turned off by both of these candidates. While Trump may have appeared aggressive and domineering and interrupting, we were prepared for that. We were used to that. But to hear Vice President Biden say, keep yapping, to call him a racist, to call him a clown, to call the President of the United States a clown, to tell him to shut up, I think some of those things were turnoffs too. The big result may be a suppression of all the vote. The independents may just decide they don't want to vote for either of these candidates as a result of some of the behavior last night.
So Martin, the same question, you're on mute right now, Martin. Same question for you, and that is the strategy that you think they went into this debate with, or the plan, and how successful they were in implementing it.
I think Biden certainly presented well, showed that he clearly could be president, that he had a good grasp of the issues. Tim Hutchinson forgot to mention one thing, that the moderator asked Trump twice, how much tax did you pay in 2016 and 2017 when the New York Times reported he only paid $750? Trump refused to answer that question. I wish the moderator had asked him 3 or 4 times and let him keep refusing to answer that question. I think Joe did well. I will tell you, my experience is similar to Tim Wirth's experience. The women in my family and neighbors, women who live in my neighborhood in Old Town Alexandria, were turned off to the extent that they were angry at Trump and angry by the fact that he kept interrupting and wouldn't let this have a natural flow. I think that this motivated, I don't know how much you could motivate Trump's people any more than they were already motivated, but I think this clearly motivated a lot of women to say, all right, this is an important election, and by God, I'm going to vote.
So following up on that and the comment about the moderator, there is a lot of criticism today about the way the debate was moderated, the lack of control by the moderator. I'd like for each of you to comment on that, the format generally of the debate, and then what, or do you think this might affect the next 2 debates in terms of how they may be conducted in order for them to be more useful for voters in terms of information. And so, Tim, I'll start with you on this one. Tim Hutchinson, sorry.
Okay, well, I think the single moderator format was fine. I can't imagine having a whole panel try to moderate that debate last night. It would have been even more chaotic. I do think that Martin has a very good point in having some mechanism by which when time limits are broken, that they can turn off a mic, shut the mic down, and move to the next speaker. I think Chris Wallace, who's normally an outstanding journalist and a great moderator, I think he more than had his hands full and didn't get high marks for being able to handle and control the debate last night.
Let me, I think we may have lost Tim Wirth for a minute. Hopefully he'll come back on. You know, moderating a debate like this is very, very tough. I think Chris Wallace is a journalist. I think he did the best he could under the circumstances. Clearly there has to be a way to turn off the mic of the person who's supposed to be quiet when this moves forward. I don't know what the debate commission will do. I don't know what the candidates will do, but the people of the United States deserve a more orderly debate than you had last night. And one candidate, Trump, set out to make this not orderly. And I hope that we will have a format that will give both candidates the opportunity to speak without interruption going forward. I do remember my friend Jim Lehrer, the late Jim Lehrer, who had moderated a lot of these debates, had his critics also from time to time. I think this is almost an impossible job to moderate a debate like this unless you have very, very tight rules. And I like Chris Wallace. I worked with him for a while. I did some commentary on Fox right after I left Congress. I don't do that anymore. And I always found Chris to be a very fair person. He more than had his hands full.
Senator Wirth, any thoughts on
I think it's
future debate?
I think it's pretty much all been said. I'm a great admirer of Chris Wallace, and I thought he was a very good choice to be the moderator, and he normally does a very good job. You know, it's almost as if, you know, in having Trump go ahead and keep interrupting and keep talking over and being so thoroughly aggressive, it was almost, you know, it was to me so surprising that it was almost as if Chris Wallace was saying, well, this is what we get. And it's my responsibility as a moderator to make sure that the American people see as much as possible. And what they see is not only the substance of a debate, but they see behavior. So letting that go on, that may be a bit of an over-the-top statement, but it was so bad, and he lost control and kept having to come back that you wonder, what was wrong, or was that part of some kind of a strategy? I don't like to be conspiratorial, but it was so surprising to me that, and also that he has an off switch right there. He could have used it and didn't. So anyway, it's too bad. Next time around, we'll all have learned a lot, and we'll watch in the next debate with great interest if Trump controls himself, if the moderator is able to manage it and moderate it. That's the word, moderate it, better than happened last night.
Could I make one other very short comment?
Sure.
It's often said that one of the decisions voters make when they vote for president is who do they want coming into their home on television for the next 4 years. And I think that answer, that may have been answered last night, and it may not be Donald Trump for the next 4 years.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there are calls today by people saying, oh, we shouldn't have any more debates in this presidential cycle, which I think is a terrible outcome or idea. So I appreciate the comments that you've all made about how these might be done better and more responsibly as we move forward. Let me turn just a minute, though, to our political parties. It was interesting that last night, Vice President Biden declared that he was the Democratic Party. And Trump has long declared that President Trump has declared that he is the Republican Party. And so we, on both sides, have divisions and people feeling a need to declare that they are, quote unquote, in charge. Just be interested in your thoughts about that and in these divisions of the parties and what they may mean as we move on in this election. And Tim, I'll start with you on Tim Hutchinson, Senator Hutchinson.
Well, I thought to myself when Vice President Biden declared himself the Democratic Party that Bernie Sanders might have another thought about that. And I think that there are probably a lot of progressives in the party who had serious questions about exactly what Vice President Biden meant by that. And on the Republican side, it has been impressive, amazing over the last 4 years, just how dominant President Trump has been and how thoroughly he controls the Republican Party and mechanisms of the party. And so I think that's more so than usual. A president always has great influence, but the fact that there was no party platform this year, that it was simply a statement of support for the president, he thoroughly controls the Republican Party. He can say, I am the Republican Party right now.
I don't think anyone should make too big a deal out of this, quite frankly, because historically, the president and the presidential candidates of both the Democratic and the Republican Party are viewed as the spokesman for their party post-convention. That's how it's been in our country for some time, and no one should be surprised by that.
Martin, I've never heard a presidential candidate declare, I am the Democratic Party, or that's pretty unprecedented.
Oh, I don't think so. I think that the public and the press have generally recognized that the party nominee is the spokesman for the party, and I wouldn't overemphasize that. Certainly, Trump has made it clear he's the Republican Party, whether anybody else in their party likes that or not.
Senator Wirth, any thoughts on this subject?
Well, I didn't think it was. I don't think Biden will use those words again. He's used them, and what he was really trying to point out, I think, was make the contrast with him in the Democratic Party and Trump in the Republican Party. I don't think that worked very well, but and he won't say it again. You are the leader, and you're trying. He could have always an opportunity there to educate people, to say it's my job to try to pull all the factions of this fractious party together, and everybody knows it's a fractious party with a lot of different factions that have to be pulled together, and say I'm the best person that there is for doing that. So anyway, maybe he'll say something like that the next time around, because in fact that is what his role is.
Well, and it also seemed that he was saying because I hear many people say, oh, I like Joe Biden, but I just don't know if I can vote for him because we'll become a more socialist country if I do. That he was trying to declare that he and what is going to happen once he becomes the president are not the policies of others in the party, but those that he ran on to become the presidential candidate. So I thought that was probably something that had been thought about ahead of time, and the reason he made that particular declaration. But, you know, you've all been on the ballot in presidential election years. And whenever that happens, you sort of take on your presidential candidate. You have to explain to your constituents the comments that were made in debate and things like that. So just interested in your thoughts on down the ballot. I mean, how do you think this presidential debate will affect those races that are going on now, many of which are very, very close as it relates to the presidential, as it relates to the presidential debate and the upcoming elections. And Tim Hutchinson, if you might comment on that.
Well, I think the head of the ticket always will either be a drag on other candidates on the ballot, or will be a boost to them. And I think this year, I believe the presidential race is very, very close. I think it's much closer than what the public polls are showing right now. There has always been, call it what you will, a shy vote. Those who are reluctant to say, I'm voting for Donald Trump, that he performs better on election day than what the polls indicate he's going to. So I think we've got a very close presidential race. And how that ends up panning out on election day will determine whether many of these races, particularly the Senate races where they're just razor close, how they tilt. This could be a very good year for the Democrats, or Republicans could hang on to the Senate and Trump manage to run the table and win the presidency again. So it definitely has an impact. We've seen wave elections before where there are dramatic changes. I know Martin's going to say this is going to be one of them, that they're going to be taking over the Senate. I think it's what, you know, I tried to be a prognosticator 4 years ago, and I learned it's very tough to predict how Donald Trump's going to perform.
All right, here's what you should look at. How many of these Republican Senate candidates are going to show up with Trump when he comes to their state? Or are they going to be busy rearranging their sock drawer, as some of them have said in the past? I remember in 1984, it was a long time ago, Walter Mondale was the nominee of the Democratic Party. And it was clear to many of us that he was going to have a very tough time. Right after the convention, Mondale came to Austin, Texas. Now, my district is in Dallas-Fort Worth. It wasn't Austin. But I was the only Democratic congressman from the entire state of Texas who appeared with Mondale in Austin. The congressman from Austin, Jake Pickle, didn't even appear with him. Now, I have a feeling that as this race plays out, a lot of these Republican Senate candidates who are in real trouble are going to hide when Trump comes to their district. Keep an eye on them, see how many of them show up and how many of them find something else to do.
I think we have lost Senator Wirth. Senator Wirth, are you still on?
I think we have lost him.
So let me turn just a minute to a subject, I guess, that was not discussed last night. On our call today, we have a number of our colleagues, former members. We have a number of people who are associated with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, which we very much appreciate them and the partnership we have with them. But their interest is in promoting the relationship between Japan and the United States. And generally, there was not, in fact, there was very little discussed that was of global interest, with the possible exception of climate change. And I didn't know if either of you might have any thoughts or comments about that relationship, the relationship between the U.S. and Japan. Japan has recently, their longtime Prime Minister Abe has stepped aside, and Prime Minister Suga is now clearly in charge there. And so it's a new day in many ways in Japan. And likewise, you know, after this election, we may have new players in the U.S., no matter who wins this election. So I would ask if you all might have any comments about this very important bilateral relationship. And Martin, I'll start with you on this.
Yeah, first of all, I believe the U.S. relationship with Japan will remain strong no matter who is president for the next 4 years. We have a very good relationship with Japan, and I see nothing on the horizon that's going to change that. So I've had the chance to visit Japan on several occasions. They are an important ally of the United States, and I think they'll continue to be recognized as such. I assume that some future debate will be devoted at least in part to foreign policy, because you're correct, LF, there was almost no discussion of foreign policy last night. That may have been intentional, because in the past we've sometimes had a separate debate which touches on foreign policy.
Tim, any thoughts on this subject?
Yes, I certainly agree that our relationship with Japan is essential, it's critical, and it's going to remain strong regardless of the outcome of this election, and we should be reassured about that. I too was very, very surprised that there was not some discussion of national security issues, foreign policy issues, and like Martin, I kind of came to the conclusion that there must have been an intention, a plan behind this, that in a future debate, that's going to be the thrust. I will say this, it was very surprising to me that President Trump, when he gave the litany of his accomplishments, and it was an impressive list of things that he accomplished, that he got done in the last 3 years, that he did not mention his peace agreements. He didn't mention anything on the foreign policy front as to his accomplishments. And whether it's trade or whether it's the peace agreements, he's got something to talk about there, and he omitted that, and that really surprised me.
I think, if I can, Tim, I think he had a certain number of points he wanted to make, primarily dealing with domestic policy. And by God, he was going to make those points no matter what the questions were. And I don't think that foreign policy was high on his agenda for that debate.
So speaking of folks outside of our country, last night, millions of people actually outside the U.S. Tuned in for our debate. This is not unusual. The U.S. debates seem always to be sort of the high watermark in terms of civil discourse and a great example of what to expect in democracy. Since we have witnessed something last night that was different, what would you say to folks outside the country about this debate? And what would you say about what it says about the U.S. and democracy in this country at this moment? And Tim, I don't know if Tim Wirth, I don't know if you heard that question, but it really had to do with people outside the country listening in last night or watching this debate, and I have to say to them as an American leader about that debate and about our country and its democracy.
Is that for me?
It's for you.
My Wi-Fi just turned off, and I've been scrambling to get it back on again. Maybe I didn't pay my bill or something. Anyway, I think it will be a reflection of just what they think, the chaos that's going on in the United States of America. I think they're very confused about us. They were more confused 2 or 3 years ago. Now I think they're just saying, let's hope that this gets us, but we can get back to some kind of a normal set of relationships. You know, it was a picture of chaos and what they see in the United States, I think, with, you know, foreign policy that has jerked from one place to another, as far as I can see, and our response to the COVID, which has been very, very, you know, inactive and non-reflective of what the rest of the world is doing. I think that as I've talked to people, and those have been largely European in the last month, they just throw up their hands and say, we can't depend on you all anymore. And this is a further indication of that. It's a great loss of status and ability, and it's really bad for the world because the world needs the leadership and what used to be when all of us were in office, an extremely admirable United States. Just a final note, I will never forget when I was at the State Department, it was a thrill to go to various sessions and very complicated negotiations, and the world would wait for what does the United States believe? What does the United States want to do? And it was our analysis and our leadership and the fact that we had done homework that would almost always carry the day. That doesn't happen now, but it can happen again. I think that's a repairable place for us to be.
Senator Hutchinson, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it showed the world how polarized our country is. I was visiting with a South African this past week, and he was asking about this. I kind of differ with my colleagues in that it is not that they don't still love the United States. They love Americans, they love America, they love the history of the country, but they're puzzled by and they're worried by the polarization that they see. And I think that was on full display last night. You used the term LF civil discourse. Well, there was no civil discourse last night on either side. There was no civil discourse. There's plenty of very strongly held beliefs represented on this call today, but there can be civility, and there should be civility. And I think that's the sad thing, that there was so much name calling on both sides last night.
Congressman Frost.
I don't think I would make an equivalent statement about that. The name calling and the chaos was primarily on the part of the president. I think that Vice President Biden has, throughout his career, stood for a strong America with strong relationship with allies, and the current president has withdrawn from the traditional bipartisan foreign policy that this country has followed ever since World War II, and to try and work very closely with our allies, both in Asia and in Europe. I was chairman of the board of the National Endowment for Democracy during the second Obama term. And I know people around the world look to the United States for leadership, and that has not been provided in the last 4 years.
So thank you all. We are now going to turn to the audience, and I'll ask Paul if he would introduce the questioners.
Yes, sir, Congressman. Our first questioner is from our partners at the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. It's Nabe Watanabe. Nabe, if you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone, you can ask your question of our panel.
Thank you very much for picking me up. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the great insights on the debate. And Japan. I'm talking from Tokyo, and Japanese are so interested in watching the debate, and many people commented and so surprised this debate is very different from former presidential debates. And so many people are wondering what's next, second one. I said Trump can control Mr. Trump more civilized manner and not to intervene others or something. Or also, we are so frustrated with the Mr. Biden talk about his plan, his policy in detail. So frustrated we didn't hear. Of course, some people would say, "Oh, the President Trump didn't give him time." But you know, next one, second one, how does the both team plan for the tactics, or any rule of debate change? I'm very curious to hear your insights.
Thank you very much for that question. And I think Senator Wirth, if you might comment, had two questions. One had to do with the next debate and how that might be formatted so that it is, in fact, a more civil discourse. And then the second question had to do with the campaigns themselves and what kind of changes they might make as a result of the first debate.
Well, I think on the first, I think we've all pretty much commented on the fact that the management of the debate was up in the air and has to change. There has to be a discipline in this, and that has to be maybe a buzzer for the moderator and to shut off people's mics or whatever, or press a button that says stop or whatever it may be. There are a lot of things that can be done and have been done over the years. In terms of what the candidates do, I think probably this morning, both campaigns are huddling and obviously thinking about what happened last night. I think the Biden people are going to be relatively happy with what transpired. I think that he got his legs under him as the debate went along and became more comfortable. That'd be my reaction to it. I think the Trump people are going to try to see if they can get the president, if it's possible, to be a little more tightly scripted so that he gets his message across. There'll be some, I hope, a time for much more discussion of foreign policy. And as Martin said, you know, the traditional role that the United States has played as an alliance builder and not as an alliance destroyer. I hope that that comes forward. That's so important, as there'll be more discussion in the future about climate change, which Trump does not understand at all, and which I didn't think Biden was very clear in his answer at all. But there'll be a chance that'll certainly come up in a future debate, which will have more international focus. I'm sure it has to, because that's a major role of the President of the United States.
Any other comments on that before we move on? So, Paul, the next question then?
Yes, sir, Congressman. Our next question comes from Ichiro Fujisaki, who is actually the former ambassador to the United States from Japan. Fujisaki-san, if you can go ahead and unmute your microphone, you can ask your question of our panel.
Thank you very much, Ichiro Fujisaki. Fascinating discussion. Thank you very much. Enjoyed it, and it was very informative as well. Looking at the debate last evening, I thought Chris Wallace should have asked President Trump one question. Sir, Mr. President, you're an advocate of law and order. Doesn't abiding by to the rules is included in your dictionary? But he didn't ask that question. That was a little disappointing. Now, I think if you're a friend of Mr. Biden, senators and congressmen, you should advise him, don't look down, don't read memos in the debate. I'm sorry to say these basics, but I think that's very important. Now, I'm asking a question on China. We hear from Washington, we hear from Americans that Democrats will be tough on China as well, even tougher because of human rights and things like that. But reading from the Democratic platform, it says that Democrats will not go into tariff war or try not to go into a Cold War. And I think that's right. So from that point, I think U.S.-China relations will move on from confrontational competition to controlled competition under Democratic Party. And it'll be very different from this administration's China policy. Not too many people really say that, but I just wanted to know the honest account, because now is election time, so all the politicians has to be seen as tough, and you have to pretend that, oh, I'm going to be strong, but are you really be so after the election? That's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And I'm going to ask Martin if you might comment on the ambassador's question regarding China and our democratic policy as articulated by President Biden in terms of changes in that policy on tariffs and Cold War and so forth.
Well, I don't hold myself out as an expert on China policy by any means. I do think that the Democratic Party has been continually concerned about intellectual property and the stealing of intellectual property by China and their businesses. And I think that will continue to be an issue under a Biden presidency. Beyond that, on tariffs, I can't answer the question. I'm not sure what the policy will be, and that's something that Vice President Biden should be asked when there is a foreign policy debate.
And Senator Hutchinson, anything on China from the Republican side?
I think through the remaining month of this campaign that President Trump's going to continue to press China as a big issue, that he thinks a Biden administration would not be strong on China. He points back to Democratic administrations of the past where the kind of confrontation that he was willing to lead that resulted in an agreement, a trade agreement. I think that's going to be a big part of the remaining campaign. He's been very tough on China, and if Trump is reelected, there will be, human rights notwithstanding, and all of the other issues that are between us. I think Trump, as a deal maker, will press hard for phase 2 in a tariff agreement. And if history's any indication, he may be successful in that. So I do think the China debate's going to continue to be a big part of the campaign.
Well, if you guys, can I join this for briefly?
Yes, please.
It seems to me that this is another indication of the need for the United States to return to an understanding of a cooperative and not a confrontational world. It's not a unipolar world anymore. I would bet that the Biden administration will return to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, to a broader cooperative economic agreement, and to pulling in many, many more individuals in Asia as they look to a rapidly changing area of the world. The Indians and the Vietnamese and the Japanese have been so core to our relationship, and make sure that we have a very, very solid grounding there of partnership in dealing with some of the challenges from China. That's been the hallmark of our foreign policy since the World War II, as Martin pointed out. And I think we definitely must return to that if we're going to end up with a peaceful resolution of many of the issues in the Pacific.
Ambassador Fujisaki, thank you for the question, and thank you for your service as well. Paul, the next question.
Sure, Congressman. The next question comes from former Congressman Phil Gingrey from Georgia, and Congressman Gingrey wants to know the panel's thoughts on how the debate may have moved the needle in polling. Congressman Gingrey, if you can unmute, you can go ahead and ask your question.
I wasn't listening carefully to my question, so repeat my question and I'll ask it again of the panelists.
Yes, sir. We were taking the one about polling and how you think the debate may have had an effect on
thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. And I thank the panelists. Y'all are doing a great job, and watched every bit of the debate last night and wasn't real happy with the overall tone. Good strategy, but poor execution on Trump's part. I understand probably what he had in mind, but the question, of course, specifically about the polling, in the last time in 2016, the polling pretty much showed the same thing in favor of the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, and it didn't turn out that way, although she did win in the popular vote by about 3 million votes. But I just don't believe, I honestly don't believe the polls. I think they're wrong. I think a lot of people feel that they would be canceled if they answer the question in the affirmative that they're supporting Trump. Yeah, what do the panelists think? And do you think that this particular debate moves the needle at all in regard to the polls?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Senator Hutchinson if he might comment on that.
Yeah, I think, President Trump's strong personality and dominance on a debate stage is both his greatest strength and weakness. And he's not going to change. I mean, if you look back 4 years ago, it was the same Trump, the same way he conducted a debate. And I just remind everybody, he won. And everybody declared him the loser. Everybody unanimously declared Hillary Clinton as the winner in those debates. So how this moves the needle, I think is very, very hard to judge, but because the New York Times and the Eastern media is denouncing him as awful because of the debate performance last night, I don't think necessarily reflects how the American people are going to respond to it. Some are going to hate it, but some are going to say, yes, we need law and order. They're going to be nodding their heads to what the president said last night. So I think we will have to wait and see in the coming days, but I'm sure not going to write him off.
I think that the key is to watch those Midwestern states that Trump carried narrowly in the last election. Hillary did not campaign well in those states. The margin that Biden has in those states is greater than the margin that Hillary had going into the election. Keep an eye on those states, on Ohio, on Minnesota, on Pennsylvania, on Michigan, and on Wisconsin. And I believe that Biden will continue to do well in those states, and largely because of the suburban vote, the suburban women in those states. I think Trump is in serious trouble, and I don't see him picking up much of anything in the polls after this debate. In fact, he may drop some when you look at the individual states in the upper Midwest that are going to determine this election.
Senator Wirth, any other thoughts on?
Well, I'll go back to what I said to begin with. I think Trump is going into this debate was behind. I think the results are the polling and people's preferences are pretty well baked in the country. He had to change that somehow, and the place he had to change it was among suburban women. I think that last night he was not successful in doing that, and that we probably won't see very much of a change in what's going on. The leads of Biden are still going to be 6 or 8 points in all of those key states, and I would bet you that won't change up one way or down the other. And we'll get down to an election that's going to be very close going into that night. And the next question that we all face is what kind of chaos will occur in the period after Election Day and the counting of the votes. And you know, that's going to be a very troubling time.
Thank you. Paul, next question.
Yes, sir, Congressman. Our next question comes from the chairman and president of our partner, Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, Dr. Satohiro Akimoto. Akimoto-san, if you can go ahead and unmute your microphone, you can ask your question.
Paul, thank you very much. My name is Satohiro Akimoto, chairman and president of Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA. We are delighted to co-host this wonderful discussion, so thank you all. My question is a little different, and just wanted to, I want you to cast a light on the House and the Senate side of election. I know that it's a big subject matter, but if you could just, you know, very quickly summarize where things are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Akimoto. And I'm going to ask Martin Frost, who was our DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee chairman for a number of years and very active in so many of the races, and has focused on the House races for such a long time. If he might first comment on this, and I'll ask the other panelists as well.
We will hold the House, and you may have a swing of 3 or 4 seats either way. It's not going to change very dramatically. There always are 1 or 2 candidates in any wave election, as you had in 2018, who don't get reelected. On the other hand, there also are some vulnerable candidates who barely were reelected in this last election. I think that we will hold the House, and the margin will be very similar to what it is today. We have a real chance of picking up the Senate. We only need a net gain of 4, 3 if we win the presidency. And I think that's very much within our reach in Colorado and Senator Wirth's state, in North Carolina, in Arizona, and some other states are very much at play. The state of Maine, we have a real chance of winning the Senate, but that hasn't happened yet. But I think the Senate is definitely in play. I think the House is not in play.
Senator Hutchinson, your thoughts?
Well, I agree. The House is not in play. The Senate, there are a lot of tough races, but I think that the Republican senators who are in tough races are very seasoned candidates. Senator Collins, she's been targeted every election. I think that she wins that seat. I think you go through these battleground states, Arizona and Colorado, North Carolina. I feel good that while we've got very tough races and it's in play and there could be a change, I think Republicans will hang on to control in the Senate.
Well, let me comment, if I might, briefly on this. I agree with what's been said about the Senate. There are great close races there, and the Democrats may well get control. Very interesting focus on a few House races that may well determine, the future of the Republic. If you look at the 12th Amendment and what happens if there's chaos, if the Electoral College is stuck, and it eventually goes to the House and the Senate for resolution, particularly the House, the vote there is going to be taken by congressional delegation, not by congressional district. So Wyoming and California have the same vote, which means that who controls a few states is extremely important to this long-term deliberation and complexity of our Electoral College. Which means that the elections in Montana and in Alaska, in the 15th district in Florida, and the 10th district in Pennsylvania become absolutely critical. I haven't received the sort of attention that I'm surprised that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee hasn't focused on them. The Speaker has just begun to understand this part of the strategy. It's very important for the Democrats to understand this and to really support those candidates. And in fact, the Democratic Party wants to build a firewall for what may happen under the 12th Amendment when we get into those deliberations in the middle of January.
Let me add, because I've actually given speeches on the Electoral College over the years, and I did a research project for the Rules Committee on what happens if it goes to the House. I did that in 1980 when John Anderson was running, and there was a theory that he might get some electoral votes. I think this is going to be resolved in the Electoral College. I don't think it's going to go to the House. And I think it is very important that all the ballots be counted in a timely manner and that we have an actual result and that it doesn't go to the House of Representatives. I think it's part of the Trump strategy is to delay, drag their feet, try and prevent votes from being counted in some states so that you don't have an electoral result. I think they fear that they could lose this in the Electoral College, not in the popular vote. And I think it's very important that all the votes be counted in a timely manner so that this is not resolved by the House of Representatives.
So Dr. Akimoto, thank you so much for that question. And thank you again for your great leadership and partnership with FMC on this and other matters. Paul, looks like we have time for one more question.
Yes, sir. Our last question will come from former Congressman Lawrence Smith. Congressman, if you can go ahead and unmute your microphone, you can ask your question to our panel.
From Florida.
Yes, sir. From the great state of Florida. Congressman Smith, go ahead and unmute.
I'm unmuted. No, now it says I'm muted.
You're good.
Larry, you're still muted. If you could unmute.
How about now?
Now, good.
Good, okay. Basically, my question is this. Watching that debate last night as a former member, but also as an American citizen, I really was appalled at the debasing of the gravity of the office of the presidency by the president. And what does that tell Americans? What does it show us about what can be done by somebody who doesn't want to adhere to the norms? It's terribly distressing to see something like this occur by the President of the United States. What face does it show to American citizens, and what face does it present to the rest of the world?
So I'm going to ask Senator Wirth if he might comment on Congressman Smith's question.
Yeah, let me first put a plug in for the former members of Congress. I would be remiss if I didn't note that the former members have come together with Issue 1 and created a very, very significant new organization called the National Council for Election Integrity. co-chaired by Gebhardt, Daschle, Frist, Ridge. You know, it's a real who's who of Republicans and Democrats. It's totally nonpartisan, and it's focused on exactly what Martin was talking about. Make sure that every vote gets counted, and make sure that we're patient after Election Day. Not try to call an election early, but let's be patient and make sure all votes are counted. So that's this National Council. I think it's going to be announced in early October, but the former members have been very deeply involved in that, have created that, and done, I think a very, very good job. So that isn't answered Larry's question, but let's go to somebody else at this point. Thanks. Thank you, Larry.
Senator Hutchinson, if he might comment on that, on Congressman Smith's question about the integrity of the presidency and the debate last night.
Well, I think opinions are pretty well established, but when we talk about the integrity of the presidency, it's easy to point to President Trump and say, well, he didn't behave well. He was called a clown by Vice President Biden. He was called a racist. He was told, keep yapping. He was told to shut up. President of the United States. So if we want to talk about the integrity of the office, the presidency, there's plenty of room for finger pointing, plenty of blame to go around. That's all.
If LF, if I could add one thing and put in.
Yeah, and this will be the concluding remarks. So Martin, if you want to wrap this up, this would be good.
Yeah, the former members of Congress has an annual memorial service honoring the people, the members of the House and Senate who have died in the last year. That will be on our website live at 5:30 this afternoon, 5:30 Eastern. It will remain on the site for a while. So I would encourage everyone on this call to tune in to our website at 5:30 this afternoon and watch the memorial service, which usually is in person in Statuary Hall, but couldn't be in person this year.
Well, let me conclude then by thanking the panelists, Senator Hutchinson, Senator Wirth, Congressman Frost. You were a great panel, and thank you for what you've just done. And I want to thank the audience as well, the members of FMC and folks who are part of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Thank you very much as well. Please don't forget next Thursday, join us again for the post-vice presidential debate forum. Thank you all again.
Thanks, LF. Nice job. Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much, Martin. Good to be with you.
Honor.
Thank you.